It's alive! It's alive!
Hey guys, Ash here coming at you today with Raid Shadow Legends Champion Guide. So today we're going to start with one of the starting champions. We got to do the starting champions at one point here on the channel, so let's go ahead and bang them out in the next few days. Starting with still my favorite of the starters, especially in the early game, in the mid game, it is none other than Kael. So today's guide is going to be on my free-to-play channel on the Vexthal account. I want to show you what a more realistic Kael will look like in the early and the mid game, what stats, what gear priorities you should be thinking about. Again, when you're kind of starting out in Raid Shadow Legends, talk about blessings and stuff, because honestly, guys, there's probably about 400 Kael guides out there on the internet. We're doing one right now because we want to be completionists here on this channel, include every champion, but we also want to give an updated guide, so again, including blessings and stuff like that. So without further ado, what does Kael do, and why do I consider him the best of all the starters, especially again in the early game? Well, my man Kael has poison on his A1 ability. It's 100% chance at landing, which is extremely valuable, even with the weak version of poison. This is specifically going to help us out tremendously in Dragon's Lair and Clan Boss, Demon Lord, Old School Clan Boss. And those are going to be two of your main focuses, especially in the early game. In Clan Boss, really, it should be your main focus every day until you stop playing Raid Shadow Legends, because that's one of the best ways to actually get your hands on some of the more scarce resources in the game, right? So Kael, Dark Bolt, I forgot the name of this ability, Dark Bolt, 100% chance at landing for 2 turns, sounds good. Acid Rain, 3-turn cooldown. It is worth putting your books into Kael, but the nice thing is, on his AoE ability here, which makes him a viable campaign farmer, no books required to get it down to a 3-turn cooldown. It attacks all enemies, has an extra 15% chance of inflicting a critical hit, so 85% crit rate will land a critical hit every single time with this ability, provided you're not going against a Force Affinity matchup where you might get a weak hit. Fills the turn meter of this champion by 25%, for each enemy killed. So it doesn't take a mathematician to tell you guys that if we kill 4 enemies with this ability, aka in campaign, it's going to fill the turn meter all the way back to full. So he almost gets back-to-back turns provided another enemy wasn't already at full turn meter. On the A3, this is Disintegrate. Attacks 4 times at random. This is on a 4-turn cooldown when you book it out. This ability does not require, but it's really nice to book out because for 2 reasons. Number 1, we really want to get this down to a 4-turn cooldown because Kael having a 50, not 40% chance of placing poisons, and if you grab the Sniper Mastery, that puts it all the way up to 45% chance. We'll talk more about masteries in just a moment here. That's going to give you a tremendous poison damage dealing ability on his A3. So we really do want to book Kael. That should be our priority, especially for new accounts. If you go with Kael as your starting champion, your account priorities should be pretty straightforward in the beginning of the game, right? Number 1 is we're going to 6-star Kael. It's going to take a lot of grinding, but you will get there. Number 2 is along the way, you may be able to actually collect just through quests and dailies and beginner tournaments, novice tournaments. You might be able to get your hands on 800 gems. You can see I'm very close. 800 gems for the very first starter that you max out in this game. And in this case, it would be Kael. Stop it with the pop-ups, man. It's not a bad idea to just go ahead and buy your masteries. So Ultimate Death Knight, I actually have them all. Wow, I have a few all masteries here, but let me try to find someone who doesn't have masteries on this account. Rhonda, there we go. So you can see, get all scrolls, cost you 800 gems. It's going to take you a lot of grinding in Miniature's Labyrinth to get your hands on enough scrolls to max out your first champion. Once you get one champion maxed out, it becomes a lot easier because all the scrolls, when you're farming minnows, will actually go to the champions that aren't already maxed out in masteries. Hopefully that makes sense for you guys, but for me personally, I don't mind paying for Kael masteries, I guess, long story short. All right, so let's talk about how we're gearing him up. Let's start talking about stat priorities here. This is my free-to-play Kael, okay? So number 1 is I want 100% crit rate. Early players make this mistake a lot with Kael especially. They put attack percentage on his chest, attack percentage or flat stat, even worse, on his gauntlets. No, no, no. you basically always want crit rate in the beginning of the game. You can graduate to crit damage, but you still want that crit rate to be 100%. So I'm talking about the gauntlets here. So critical rate gauntlets are a great idea for Kael in the beginning of the game. Eventually, you're going to get him all the way ascended as well. That should also be a priority. So take him to all the way to level 60, get him all the way ascended, and then find an accuracy banner. This is a great accuracy banner because we have a double speed roll as well. I'm going to put out an updated kind of a main stat and substat guide on my other YouTube channel, Ash Raid Shadow Legends. If you guys want to go ahead and check that out, probably coming out later this week at the time of this recording. Either way, this is a very, very valuable banner here, and that should be, again, ascending to 6 stars so you can wear a banner and getting accuracy on it because we need accuracy to land the poisons on his A1 ability, Dark Bolt, and to land those poisons on the A3. Again, assuming there's some beginners watching this video, whenever you have a champion doing anything to an opponent, whether it's a boss or another PvP in the arena, you need accuracy in order to land those debuffs or in order to reduce turn meter, put skills on cooldown. All of those require accuracy. Now, abilities such as maybe poison from a toxic set, a stun from a stun set, basically debuffs that come from artifacts do not require accuracy. That is the exception rather than the rule. Everything that you can cast in their skills section does require accuracy. For that reason, we really, really love accuracy sets or perception sets on Kael. Now, you're given some pretty decent lifesteal gear in the early game, so I just put that right on my champion starter, in this case, Kael again. So back to stat priorities, guys. We want 100% crit rate. We want 210 is perfect on the accuracy, generally 10 points of accuracy per stage of the dungeon that you're working on, okay? So 210 is good enough for me to be landing all my debuffs all the way up to stage 21 or so of dungeons, but really I can get by even against, provided the affinity is spirit or magic or void, I can usually get by with 210 accuracy even against level 25, dungeons. Anyway, after crit rate and accuracy, we want as much speed as we can get on this champion, with one exception we'll talk about in a moment, and some defense, HP, and attack. Now, all of these are important, right? Because what good is a bunch of attack on your starting champion, no matter who it is, if they're just going to die all the time, right? So there's no issues with going with defense percentage on the chest, as I have over here. It's another common early game mistake. Most of your damage from Kael, aside from campaign farming with the Acid Rain, is actually coming from the poisons. And these poisons, you just need accuracy to land them. You don't need attack. Attack does increase the value of bombs, but Kael's not putting any bombs. He's putting down poisons, okay? So we don't care so much about attack other than the A2 ability. So a little bit of attack is nice, but we need him to stay alive first and foremost. So defense or HP on the chest is absolutely fine. You almost always want to be going speed on the boots on Kael, and then crit rate, as we said, on the gauntlets, okay? The only exception to the boots is if you're only using Kael as your campaign farmer, which to me, probably would apply to nobody, you know, because usually, I guess maybe if you went with another starting champion and then you pulled Kael and you wanted to use him as your campaign farmer, you could put attack percentage on his boots because you can actually farm campaign with a very slow speed, okay? Other than that, though, go speed on the boots for clan boss, for dragon, for everywhere else in the game that you'll be using this champion. So we're looking for, again, some crit rate, sure, as substats, some HP, some defense, most importantly, some accuracy and crit rate, speed, as substats on this champion. I showed you already critical rate. I showed you accuracy on the banner. Crit damage on the amulet. Nothing wrong with going HP or going defense on the amulet as well. Most importantly, we're looking for accuracy substat on that amulet. And then on the ring, we have HP with some defense as well. Again, survivability is very important. So masteries on Kael. This is a very, very typical mastery build for Kael. Here we go. So again, very basic here, guys. We're going down support tree and offense tree. Offense tree, we're coming down the left-hand side all the way down to War Master to get extra damage. War Master is a real go-to mastery, especially for, if you're not sure, for a PvE champion. It deals extra damage, especially against bosses, clan bosses, stuff like that. Life Drinker I really like. This is going to be healing by 5% of the damage inflicted when we have less than 50% HP. The reason I like this is it synergizes really nicely with lifesteal gear anyway, right? So again, we have lifesteal on him. This is going to be healing him by 30% of the damage dealt. It's a really good strategy to put lifesteal on your damage dealers in the early game before you have a bunch of revivers and a bunch of really good healers on your team, right? It will keep them alive all by themselves with their lifesteal gear. So support tree, we went down in pinpoint accuracy, charge focus, more accuracy, Swarm Smiter, more accuracy. Lore of Steel, basic two-piece sets, we're going to be getting a stat bonus, so that applies to the accuracy set that we have on him. Doesn't apply to lifesteal, but still, it's nice to have. Master Hexer, the chance at extending the duration, 30%, of the poisons that he's dishing out. That's very, very powerful. It can equal to a lot of extra damage throughout the duration of a longer battle especially. So Master Hexer and Sniper for me are going to be mandatory on Kael. I want that Sniper ability to get that poison chance increased from a 40 or 50 to a 45 or 55 depending on you book him on that A3. So those are the masteries that I love on Kael. Let me go ahead and show you really quickly how I use this champion. So obviously I use him in my main clan boss team as just a poison damage dealer. I use him, I'm not going to show you all the battles here because it's kind of redundant, but I use him in Dragon's Lair, of course. Do I use him in 20? I use him even in stage 25 against the Force Affinity Dragon. He still is the damage carry on this particular squad, even though it's a negative affinity matchup, just because those poisons do add up, even if we're getting a few weak hits in there. I use him, of course, as my campaign farmer here on my main account, or excuse me, my free-to-play account, sorry. So we go 12-3, which is where we campaign farm for the most silver and experience. We're leveling up some food right now. He's not the fastest campaign farmer in the world, and again, I could put attack percentage on his boots, and he probably would move a little bit faster. It doesn't sound very intuitive because if we take away speed, how could he be moving faster? But really, he'll be one-shotting all the enemies every time. You can see there was a couple, like a hit like that, for example, would probably actually kill the enemy. But either way, we're looking at around like a 20-second campaign farmer, maybe a little bit longer, particularly on this unlucky RNG run. The most important thing is he's healing himself up with a lifesteal, and he's getting the job done. So 12 seconds would be his fastest speed, because I've only used Kael on this account, and 12 is my best time. So there you have it, guys. So I'm just going to sell the shield. The reason that we farm in 12-3, again, for new players, is because shields in this game, they sell for a little bit more silver. So we're going to be farming a lot on 12-3. So stage 12 gives the most amount of experience, and then we're going to maximize our silver as well. If you only care about experience, you could come down in farm stage 6 or even 7 if you wanted to. Give you a little bit more experience, but I prefer a little bit more silver at the same time, right? Because silver is so hard to get in this game, and you can see I'm not silver broke, but I'm pretty close. I also use Kael as my arena nuker, and I said I would come back to something earlier. We talked about having him as fast as possible. An important note on Kael, guys, is as it pertains to the arena, we always want to have our debuffer, whether it's War Maiden, whether it's in this case, Duck the Pierce, who I did a guide on a few days ago. We want them going before our nuker. So Duck's speed is 197. Kael's speed is 191, okay? So we want the person, whoever champion is going to be casting the decreased defense or the weaken on the enemies, he's going to be setting the table for our nuker. Oftentimes, nukers will go last on your team. So Kael does a really good job getting the job done there. Was that redundant a little bit, maybe? But either way, he gets the job done as my nuker. I happen to run 2 nukers because right now, I feel like teams are very tanky out there inside the game overall. But Kael is my campaign farmer. He's my clan boss carry. He's I'm trying to think of all the areas I use him. My dragon carry. He is my arena nuker. I use this dude almost everywhere, and I would say I'm in still kind of the early/mid game on this account, but you can see he does pretty good damage. Let me pull up the multipliers really quickly here, guys. We have a 3.5 multiplier on the A1. That's an average damage rating, thanks to hellhades.com here. We have a 4.65 multiplier on the A2 ability. Remember, this does have an extra 15% chance to get a critical hit too, which is really, really nice to have. 4.65 is actually really, really strong, especially for a rare champion. And then we have a 1.5, which is a weak rating on the A3, but don't let that fool you again. again, it can do a lot of damage just from the big versions of poison. So there you go, guys. This is an updated Kael guide with one more thing. I mentioned at the top of the video, we were going to talk about blessings, of course, and I will say the two quick things on the new stuff in the game right now, the fairly new stuff. Number one is, in terms of ascending our artifacts, I don't think I have any oil at all. Oh, I do have oil. My bad. We want to start with the boots, because we really want to try to see if we can get a speed roll. So we don't. We get HP, but we'll take it, right? And then I want to come over to the gauntlets as my second priority, and I want to ascend that to see if I can get more crit rate or crit damage. We get attack percentage, which is really, really good, obviously, for Kael. So I'm going to go ahead and ascend it again, and that's going to bump up our attacks. So I would prioritize ascending the boots and the gauntlets, looking for speed, and then looking for crit rate and or crit damage from the gauntlets as our ascension stat. In terms of blessings, I think it's a no-brainer for Kael to go with Phantom Touch. It's extra damage based on his attack. You can get extra crit damage, extra HP, extra attack, as well as a bunch of extra damage depending on the ascension level. All right, guys, there you have it. That's an updated Kael guide for you all. We'll have the other starters coming at you really, really soon. Thank you for watching, and as always, take care, guys.